There's a lot of techniques in string playing that are just hard rhythmically and hard to do and hard to keep track of the beat. And so in this video section, I would like to address some of those and perhaps give some strategies on how to fix them. Troublesome techniques. It kind of sounds like a Benjamin Britten piece, with the alliteration. It's like the lost fifth movement to Simple Symphony, troublesome techniques. And it's just a mess. Pizzicato is hard. And I know that's maybe a contradictory statement because a lot of the method books do left hand only at the beginning. In fact, I think most of them do. And, it should be easier because we're doing everything just with the left hand and we don't have to worry about the bow. But in concert music, pizzicato is much harder than arco. In the younger orchestras, the beginning orchestras, where they have the obligatory pizzicato section, rushes like crazy, and that's the most dangerous part of any, grade 1, grade 2 piece is the obligatory pizzicato section. As a concert judge, when I'm listening to Dragon Hunter for the 99,000th time, there's the B theme, which is entirely pizzicato, and we just all look at the score and we look at the group and we just hold our breath and hope that they pull it together, because that's the part, if something's going to go wrong in Dragon Hunter, it's going to be that pizzicato section. It just happens far too often. So this is another thing where, the director worked so hard on the spot. It's not like the director isn't aware of how dangerous this is. And it's not like the students aren't aware of how dangerous this is. So, they turn the metronome up to 11 and, everybody's, stomping their feet and whatever, doing everything they can to maintain the pulse. But with pizzicato, maintain the beat and the pulse is not the issue. Or they're saying like, watch me, watch me, watch me. And, they're conducting with gigantic motions, maybe even with both hands, just like a drum major on the marching band field, like follow me, while the metronome is going on at the same time. And the students are still rushing. And it might not be because of a musicianship issue or because they're not watching or because they're ignoring the metronome. It might be a technique issue. I'm going to use another sports analogy, and I'm sorry if you're not into sports, but hopefully you can lock into this one. So I want you to think about a pitcher in baseball. Now, once a pitcher throws the ball, once that release occurs, the pitcher can no longer control the direction of the ball. Once it releases from the hand, it's gone. So if the pitcher throws the ball and it doesn't go where it's supposed to go, what happened? Was it because of the release? Probably not. There's probably a million things that could have gone wrong before the release that affected the accuracy of the pitch. And in some places they have these really advanced training centers where they have like cameras and computers and everything that are honed on these pitchers, and they say, okay, well, your elbow's this and your hip is this and this is going on here, and look at your foot down here. And there's a lot of different things that they look for and adjust in the technique to make sure that those pitches are coming in accurately. And I think in pizzicato, we can definitely break down what happens before we release the string to make sure that the rhythm is accurate and that the sound enters when we want it to. It's really important to analyze what happens before the pizzicato. How do we prepare the pizzicato before we make the sound? Just like how does a pitcher prepare the pitch before the pitcher throws the ball? This is very important. This is going to ensure the accuracy, or if we ignore the technique and we skip steps, that's what causes the rushing in pizzicato. I'm going to suggest to you that every technique in string playing has to be prepared. Something has to happen first before that technique to occur. And with pizzicato, there's a few things that need to occur every single time before the note is played to ensure rhythmic accuracy. If you just pluck, 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 and you're not going through all the proper steps, it's just kind of like a pitcher flicking the ball with ignoring the rest of their body and what happens before the release. One of my demonstration videos for this episode is geared entirely towards pizzicato, and I hope it helps a lot of you make sure that your students are putting every single step so that the pizzicato is perfectly accurate. Tremolos are hard, and a lot of times when there are passages in concert music that are played tremolo, it starts to fall apart immediately after the tremolo. There's something about moving the bow in a rapid succession that kind of turns the brain off. You're moving the and the brain just kind of shuts down and powers off. and students forget what's going to happen next after the tremolo. Let's break down tremolos into measured tremolos and unmeasured tremolos. So of course, measured tremolos are just kind of like shorthand. It's just like you see a half note with the 4 dots under it, and okay, that means that those are going to be eighth notes, or sometimes they take a half note and they just put a hash through the stem, and it's like, okay, I need to break this into eighth notes, or 2 means 16th notes. But if there's 3 hashes, well, that's going to be an unmeasured tremolo, and that's just kind of done as rapidly as possible. And that's where we have the most issues. If your students are having trouble with measured tremolos, go back to my previous video where I talk about short rhythmic values and fast rhythmic values and how to make sure all of your students are playing in the correct part of the bow and that they're all playing in the same part of the bow. If it's an unmeasured tremolo, it sort of falls into a different category, and we need to look at what happens before the note and what happens after the note. A lot of band directors might wonder why string players don't tap their feet when they play. And that's kind of a conversation for another time maybe. But like in band and in choir, the rhythm is internal, and tapping your foot is a way to externalize that rhythm. But usually for string players, rhythm is always externalized through the bow. With the unmeasured tremolo, this is kind of not the case, because the tremolo is occurring in rapid succession in the same part of the bow. We're not getting that distance or that connection to the bow that would allow us to count through a long rhythmic value. And also the process of moving the bow back and forth so quickly, I'm telling you, it does something with the brain that kind of turns off that internal counting mechanism if you allow it to. So this is one of the instances where we may want to listen to the band director and say, well, why don't you tap your foot? Well, maybe we should, in a tremolo situation, tap the toe. Because of the technique and just the unusual nature of it, we can develop a disconnect from the beat. So tapping the toe, doing something external, might establish a connection to the beat. But we also, just like the pizzicato, we need to figure out what's happening before the tremolo and what's happening after the tremolo, because a reason why we might be rushing or dragging that tremolo is because the tremolo, just wherever we wind up in the bow at that time, might be in a weird place. Tremolo is much easier to play in the upper half of the bow than the lower half of the bow. And so a lot of times with the tremolo, we'll play a big note, like a big bow stroke, and then, the smaller bow strokes after. But then what if immediately after a tremolo, you have a down bow whole note or something like that, and then the rhythm starts to fall apart because you're in the upper half of the bow? Maybe it's a bowing issue at that point. You need to do a lift or something, get back to the lower half of the bow, or figure out how to do the tremolo in the middle of the bow or something like that, so that whatever is coming up next can help with that issue. So if your students are having an issue with the tremolo and it's affecting the rhythm, they don't know exactly when that tremolo is over, and you've externalized it and it's still not working, try to have them tremolo more towards the middle of the bow, or try to have them reposition the bow for whatever is coming next to make it more logical. Like if the piece just started, the measure after the tremolo, how would they play that? You just start, okay, measure after the tremolo, go. What do their bows naturally tend to do right after the tremolo? Well, then try, through the process of the tremolo, try to get the bow to that location somehow, either through a lift or moving the tremolo to a different part of the bow, so that their bows are naturally where they feel like they should be. Or what's coming up before the tremolo, have them play the tremolo. Okay, where are we in the bow right now? Okay, what happens before? So is there a way that we can adjust our bowing so that we're right there in the bow, so that we don't end up rushing what's happening before the tremolo, or our tremolo's in a weird spot, or tremolo's just bizarre anyway. Trills are hard. And a lot of times when students play trills, again, they get that disconnect from the beat, and I think it's because that rapid motion between the fingers, it just kind of shuts the brain off, just kind of like with the bow and tremolo. If it's a concerto, and you get the 1/6/4 cadenza and the 5/7 trill that's going to go to 1, well, it's no big deal because you use trill, and then it's like, all right, we're going on. But if the whole orchestra is playing a trill, or if a section of the orchestra is playing a trill, it can really mess with their rhythm, and they can get off, there can be phasing, and there can be a lot of bad stuff happening. So this is a case where it's probably not going to be as much of a bowing issue. It could be a bowing issue, but it's probably not going to be as much of a bowing issue as it is, again, an externalization issue where they're trilling. That rapid motion just kind of disconnects the student from the beat. And so for here, again, we can try one of those toe tapping things, whatever. We need to do something extra to help externalize the beat so that everybody is back on the right track when the trill is over. A lot of times our off-the-string techniques can cause rhythm and tempo issues. Start playing off the string and it complicates things and things can get more chaotic. Another thing to consider about techniques that occur off the string is that a lot of these techniques only work within a certain tempo range. And so if you're not playing the piece within that tempo range, it's very difficult, for instance, to play spiccato if the piece is being played too slow. It's difficult to get your students to play spiccato anyway and start getting them to find that sweet spot and get them to figure out how the bow starts to skip. But if it's also too slow, then they have no chance at that. And in order to play the spiccato correctly, they might try to start rushing or the technique might break down in some sort of other shape or fashion. Here's the deal. If the left-hand technique cannot get up to speed for some of these off-the-string techniques, if the left-hand technique's never going to quite be up to par and the piece is going to have to be performed slower, that's going to create some issues. So maybe the better strategy is to work on that left-hand technique, whatever it might be. Start making sure that everybody's got that left-hand shape, make sure that everybody has finger pressure, that they're not squeezing, and with the thumb, with the left hand, that the cello and bass thumb is where it's supposed to be, and they're fluid with the left hand so that they have the technique to be able to play fast. And then once the technique is established and they can play at those speeds, then you could start programming those pieces that have some of those off-the-string bowings that require a higher tempo range. And we see this at UIL a lot because the bottom third of the score sheet, if you take a piece of music that's supposed to be played spiccato in the 16th note passages, and it's not happening, well, is that going to affect the tempo? Yes. Is that going to affect the style? Is that going to affect the rhythm? It's just a lot of these things are going to just break down at the bottom of the sheet, and everything else can be great. It can be great tuning, great accuracy, all that kind of stuff, but, the bottom third's really going to suffer. So it's particularly for contest, it might be the better strategy to wait until the students can play at that speed before you program a work that requires an off-the-string technique that's going to need to be quicker. Since the bow is on the string a lot less for off-the-string techniques, whether it's bouncing or skipping or brushing off, it's even more important that everybody is in the same part of the bow. And it's even more important that they find that sweet spot for that rhythm or that tempo range, because it's going to create a lot of more complications if we're trying to do it in a part of the bow where it doesn't quite function as naturally. Now, is it impossible? Of course not. I mean, you could go and look at Joshua Heifetz playing like a Paganini caprice and just doing like insane things with the bow. But, not everybody in your group is Heifetz, right? So make it easy for them, find that part of the bow where they should be in, experiment if that's not right, move it up or down a little bit, and again, insist that everybody is in the same part of the bow when they're playing off-the-string techniques. That's going to be critical for rhythmic accuracy. For more information, I have a series on spiccato, and you can go check that out. There's some strategies on how to stage it to get the students up to that level to where they understand how to leave the string and different parts of the bow that they can be in, and some strategies for that. So go check that out, and it also applies to some of the other off-the-string techniques too, and a lot of those ideas are universal. You can prevent a lot of frustration for you and your students. You can take that out of the equation by setting up their technique for some of these troublesome techniques, send them up in the right part of the bow and give them some strategies to where you don't have to turn the metronome up to 11. You don't have to scream and yell. You don't have to bang the baton on the podium or do this kind of stuff. Just develop one of these strategies and make it easier for them to play the technique. That way, it's less headache and you can move on to more important things.